Hey, sweet listener, how are you? I'm Cecilia Capehart-Bullen. Welcome to what is more than a love story, but it is a love story. And like every honest love story through time, it starts at a park and ride, although not in the way one might think.
Yes, hello, my name's Matt Bullen. This is the first episode of A Brit, a Brat, and a 25-year gap, a Seattle age gap marriage. You're very welcome. Thanks for
Yes.
joining us.
Yes, thank you.
As you might have guessed, the 25-year gap in question is the one in the marriage between Cecilia, my wife, and I. It's a big old quarter of a century, and this podcast is going to be about our marriage, because we think there's one or two things that are of passing interest. But when we were planning it, we caught each other's eye and thought, oh, crikey, there's little more insufferable than going on and on about our love life. As
Yeah.
Cecilia says,
It's hard enough to pay attention to that when it's famous people. So with people you don't know at all, it would be unbearable. But we do like to think of the difference in our ages, and I'm in my 20s and Matt's in his 50s, as sort of the lens of how the podcast will go, how we will see things differently, and commentary and different views on things in media and just all types of stuff.
yeah, and if I can bite a bullet, can I give your age?
Well, yeah, I'll give my age. I'm 26.
And I'm 51. And quick bit of housekeeping first, though. We have an email address. It's aBrit&aBrat@gmail.com. That's no hyphens, no ands, no nothing. Just aBrit&aBrat@gmail.com. And my wife is now going to pronounce it in American English.
aBrit&aBrat@gmail.com.
Beautifully.
And we'll link that below.
Yeah. Now, the reason we give it to you that early is that, as you might have noticed, Cecilia started this with a question to you. Because this is a podcast about age gaps generally, because they're everywhere we look. We live in probably the oldest corner of modern Seattle, and whenever we go outside our front door, we go down a steep hill, because where we live is like living on a ratcheted parking brake, and soon we're walking literally on top of an underground city that, and spot the irony here, because we're podcasting this in the middle of a pandemic, the old city was hastily built over in 1907 because of fears of bubonic plague. That's why it was just consigned to underground. And so when we go out, we're very aware that was just only 100 years ago. And you still go down to see some of the old shop fronts. So we're aware of an age gap there. Where we're podcasting from, we can see the top of Smith Tower. If you don't know Smith Tower in Seattle, have a look at it. Look it up on your phone. And until 1963, that beautiful little Lego-like building was the tallest structure on the west coast of the USA. And then 25 years after that, just the age gap between Cecilia and I, it was dwarfed by skyscrapers everywhere in downtown Seattle. And if you visit Seattle, you wait till you come out of Beacon Hill Tunnel on light rail, and you'll see Smith Tower right there, nestled in the middle of everything that dwarfs it. So time goes quickly. Did you see, Cecilia, how I corrected my grammar there? I was about to say time goes quick, because I've spent enough time
I like
in
both.
the States.
Time goes quick or time goes quickly.
Yeah, time
But
goes
quickly
quick.
is correct.
Right.
Sounds right, anyway.
Yeah. So
Right.
we want you to email us about how age gaps are apparent in your life. Maybe there's that patch of garden that you used to keep clear in your yard because you used to play catch when your child was in their stroller, or your niece or nephew or the neighbour's kid, and you used to keep it clear. And now, next thing you look, at a glance, 18 years have gone past, that kid's now in college, and you look at that patch of the yard and it's overgrown with brambles and rhubarb. And
Maybe
you think,
that girl in college is dating a man twice her age.
Okay.
And you think, wait a minute.
and immediately Cecilia's dragged us down to the bedroom.
I haven't, but, you know.
But they're everywhere, age gaps, and that's what this podcast is really going to be about. It's going to be about how Cecilia and I see the world differently because of our ages. Mm-hmm. Differences in what we wear. Crikey, you should see her taking me clothes shopping.
And differences and culture. Because
Yeah.
I was born in D.C. That's Washington, D.C., and the other side of the country, not this Washington that I live in now. And Matt was Born in England.
I was born in England. I was born a few miles from London in a town called Guildford, which has a 1,000-year-old castle. But before, you see, I'm getting hung up on buildings already. It's like I'm a cross between a historian and a tour guide. But that's where I was born. So that's what this is really going to be about. Because every day, Cecilia and I are either bent double in laughter because, for example, now sit tight, listeners, sit tight, because I'm about to rattle the planet with this fact. Cecilia, the other day, I was talking to her and I said about someone we heard on the radio, and I said, "Oh, she sounds a bit like Bjrk." And there was an icy silence.
Well, who's that?
And Cecilia said, "Yeah." She said, "Who's that?" And I said, "You are kidding. You're 26.
But I wasn't kidding, because I had never heard of Bjrk until you told me.
Now, even
and
now...
I've done little research now also, sorry, but...
Yeah, but I'd never heard, to be fair, I'd never heard of, oh, come on, what are they called?
The Weeknd or Doja Cat, those were the two.
That's the fella's name, The Weeknd.
The Weeknd, with no E at the end. And he just very famously boycotted the Grammys. And he told his label that he will never let them put his name up for the Grammys again.
Yeah.
But anyhow, yeah, so that's cool.
Doja Cat has the...
And you love her songs.
Yeah, she's
Yes.
the one with the bottom.
Yes.
Isn't she?
One of many, yes.
One of many bottoms? What? Anyway.
Yeah.
But so, to be fair, I'd never heard of them. But if you, honestly, ask your nearest and dearest, and if you can find just one other person above the age of 10 who hasn't heard of Bjrk, again, you know the email, aBrit&aBrat@gmail.com. Write in and let us know.
You might be disappointed, Matt, by how many 10-year-olds don't know who Bjrk is.
I don't think so. But anyway,
But they might not know Doja Cat
I'm
either.
willing
I
to
don't
be,
know.
Well, I'm willing to be
Probably will.
corrected.
TikTok.
Anyway, next, let's move on to how we met.
Okay.
Now, we met just when I'd celebrated my 49th birthday, and you were about to celebrate your 24th. And by the way, listener, we hadn't forgot the hook that we started this podcast on. This has to do very much with a park and ride. Mm-hmm. And that's another challenge to you, by the way, when you're hovering over the email button. Name me one love story through history that has not started at a park and ride. I think you'll find they all have. It's usually North Bend or Renton.
Pretty Woman. Definitely there was one in a park and ride or on the street.
There we go. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure
Cars
that all
involved.
of Shakespeare's romances started at one. Maybe one near the Midlands in Britain. But that's my other challenge to you as a listener. Name me a love story that hasn't started at a park and ride. Ours did, and we'll come to that.
The most challenging podcast on the internet
But-
for the viewer.
Yeah, exactly. But before we go much further, I have to strike what they used to call in the 1960s a bum note in this conversation, talking of birthdays. Because I don't know if this is representative of my wife's generation, and it's a blot on that generation if it did. But I took a deep breath there, because when she told me this recently, I told her I was going to mention it on the podcast. A, I was shocked and had to be brought round with smelling salts. And B, she withdrew from the room, as well she might, and you'll find out why in a second. And I said, this is going on the podcast because it's so appalling.
Right.
And
But not really.
and then she retreated
Sweet
from the room.
sign of friendship.
And I was aware of her absence. And I went into the corner of our little study in our small apartment, and I found her at the back of the study in an off-white Victorian wedding dress with a Swiss Army knife in her hand, the blade glinting on and off to my eyes, and she was clutching to her an old musical box that she'd been given as a child. And she knows that I used to work in the shadow of London Bridge, and she knows that I was born not far from London Bridge, and this is the tune that she was playing with her eyeless gaze into the 1,000-yard distance. Well, that's what was playing, and this is why. I don't mean to sound like a High Court judge, Cecilia, but I'm going to take you back to your 16th birthday, 10 years ago, and we're going to start off. What was the basic item that you had told your friends was desirable for your 16th birthday?
I didn't ask for anything because that's gauche.
You're evading the
But
point.
let me finish. I had a little get-together with my close girlfriends when I was turning 16, my sophomore year of high school, 10 years ago. And I got a box from Build-A-Bear, which is a rather large cardboard box meant to look like a house for a bear, decorations on it. Anyway, it was filled to the brim with stolen panties. Underwear.
Now stop right there. Now that isn't a bad gift from your girlfriend. Okay,
it was a lovely
couple
gift,
of pairs.
and I still have pairs to this day.
Yeah, but how many pairs were in that box?
36 pairs. One for each key in a piano.
Right, and now we're coming to the thing that made me faint. How were those acquired by your two friends, Cecilia?
I already admitted they did not pay for them. As was the style of the time, because we were mall rats and all of that.
So your generation is represented by three young women, about 15, 16 years old.
That wasn't all I got. Hold up. Paid for, the paid part of the gift was an eighth of marijuana.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Is
I
a
didn't
good
know
amount,
that bit.
and it'll last you a few weeks.
Some of the people
Back
listening...
in high school, it would last you a few weeks.
Some of the people
and
listening...
I'm not going to list any names because this was in Virginia around, 10 years ago. So it was illegal. In fact, it's still illegal there. But anyway.
And the good people listening to this...
They risked their freedom for me.
I'm going to get this point now. If it's the last thing I do, a lot of the people listening to this, it will still be illegal, probably even to hear the word on the radio. And you've just uttered it on a podcast, I should say.
Say whatever you want.
Oh, crikey.
Just get demonetized.
But, so, as I say, and you've got me off track here, that's representative of your generation. Now, I don't blame your friends. I won't name them. Maybe we can get one of them on the podcast to call in and tell us about it one day. Maybe not. But I don't blame them, because I've met them, as I say, and they're good, wholesome women who've learned their lesson. It's you who I see as the criminal in this, because you're a receiver of stolen goods. You're a fence. And 36, just before we get off the subject, 36 is an interesting number. At first I thought, well, maybe they thought that's 3 years worth.
I don't think they were counting. I think they hit up that Victoria's Secret and took handfuls.
At first I thought 3 years at one pair a month. And then I thought, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. That's not enough. But then I thought, maybe they thought they would quit while they were ahead. And what they were aiming for was 52 pairs, and they thought that's one pair a week for a year, and that's about how often you change.
It was such a great birthday.
She's skating over that.
We watched The Grinch with Jim Carrey. It was excellent. I was so excited when I got all those underwear. It was really fun. And they took like joke pairs too. Anyway, I like a big, huge pair that have Mickey Mouse on them. Like the joke was that they were really big.
These are your undies again?
They probably fit now. No, yeah.
Yeah, I think the listener and I have switched off as soon as we found out they were stolen. We're not interested in what was on them. Yeah. Okay, we'll get off that. But there was something before we carry on. There was something you wanted to say, because I told you I was going to tell them that. There was something you wanted to say about my favourite brand of shampoo. Now, what was it you have to say about John Frieda's...
Oh, yeah.
Was it? Beautiful Brunette.
John Frieda's Beautiful Brunette.
Visibly
makes your
deeper.
Hair completely brown again and no longer
visibly
peppered
deeper.
with gray. Like if I was looking at you right now, I would not say that the sides of your head are completely gray or that the sideburns have gray in them, because they don't anymore because of John Frieda.
Right,
John
but
Frieda
why is
sent
it...
us free shampoo.
Yeah, can I get a word in? Why is it that whenever I come out of the tub like a faithful puppy and I say, look, and I've got this beautiful mahogany crest, like looking at a bar of Cadbury's Bournville dark chocolate. That'll throw the American listeners, because it's not called Bournville over here, it's called Hershey's or something. And you sort of laugh. You always chuckle. You're stifling a laugh.
And then what do I say? I go, yeah, honey, yeah, it looks brown.
So you're suggesting it's not quite as effective as I think. What?
You have all your hair and it's beautiful. And some of it does turn brown.
Well, I'm shocked.
Silver fox.
All right. we'll move
you
on
go.
from Silver Fox.
You know, there's no term like that for women. It's unfortunate. So when women go gray and they're older, what is it? Silver hag. There's no silver fox for women. Maybe you can call a woman a silver fox, but...
Well, yeah, well, be that as it may. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
We'll come back to that.
Right.
I can
so
tell you're getting hungry, aren't you?
I am,
Because
yeah.
it's one of your favourite
In
topics.
fact, tonight I was going to make a special treat I got for Matt at Trader Joe's, which is he loves spaghetti bolognese, and they make spaghetti bolognese raviolis. And I got 2 packs of those, and I got red sauce, and I got Swiss cheese to grate over the top. But we also have steak, so we might have steak. We're clearly
Okay.
strict vegetarians in this house, but
Okay.
okay, yeah.
But that's our dindins.
Well, yeah, that's our difference. The steak probably would have. Oh, anyway.
Okay.
Why don't you tell the story now of what happened before you met me, a few days before
Yeah.
you met me?
No,
Because
it
you still
wasn't.
had the
Sorry
hospital
to-
bracelet on.
Yeah, sorry to correct you, love. It wasn't a few days. It was fewer than 48 hours.
Well, a day then.
Yeah. So this is what happened. On Thursday, the 11th of October, 2018, I had a work interview a few miles outside of Seattle at a ballet company, a dance company. Ballet will keep coming up in this because it's something I used to write about and being a bit involved with. So ballet will keep coming up. And I had an interview there, and I got to this park and ride to get a connecting bus to this town. Now, every park and ride has one stop that seems to be about 3 miles away from all the others, and I realised that mine was leaving from that stop. And I raced down the stairs, and then I looked at my watch and I thought, I've got about 3 minutes. So I slowed down to a slower pace, and I got to the bus stop, and I looked at my watch, and I collapsed. And literally the next thing I remember, and it felt like being in a movie, was that I was on my back in an ambulance that was going about 70 miles an hour. That I could hear the sirens, and without an anaesthetic, they were putting metal staples in my head, and I heard one of the paramedics say, "We can't stop the bleeding." I was in hospital for the whole of that day. That was the Thursday, and then discharged myself at about 4 in the afternoon. They weren't sure what caused it, but that was the Thursday. Friday I just had resting, and then on the Saturday, and this is what's so interesting about the saying, big doors swing on little hinges, because on that Saturday I got up and I got my keys and my wallet, and I thought, do I need to go to the supermarket? Do I need to go to Safeway? And I thought, no, I'm too tired. Then I thought, no, I'm out of bread, I'm out of beer, and I thought, I was wavering. And I looked at the closed front door and I thought, oh, yeah, I'll go. And I got there, and I walked down one aisle, and I walked down the next. It was about mid-afternoon. And then there was the aisle where on one side is the beer, on the other side is the cheese. And in that aisle was a very tall young lady with long blonde hair with another woman who I thought is either a good friend, but looks like it's probably her mum.
And it was my mom.
And it was your mum, and you were kindly reading a cheese label. I don't know if one of you had forgotten or remembered your glasses or whatever, but that's what you're doing. And being a man, I thought, she's pretty, and I thought no more of it. Until 10 minutes after that, I was doing that thing where you get to the checkout and it's sort of quiet and there's a few people at each, so you think, how am I going to decide which one to go to? You know, do I know one person who's working who's very fast at checking people out? No, couldn't see that. Is there one that's got an enticing looking array of candy? No, nothing like that. And then I saw this young woman with the blonde hair and with her mum, and again, being a man, I thought, I'm going to go and line up behind her. And I did. And I'll let Cece take over in a minute. That's my nickname, Cecilia.
Yeah.
And I'll let her take over in a minute. But what I did was, I made sure that when I put the goods divider down, that I said to the check stand operator, because I'd forgotten my loaf of bread, I made sure I said in my best English accent, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, I have to nip away for bread and I'll be right back." And now I'm going to hand it to Cecilia.
Yeah, so I didn't see Matt when I was with my mom at the Safeway checking out, but I heard his voice, and it's so beautiful, and I love England, and growing up, always watched all those, Hugh Grant and movies. So anyway, I was really intrigued also because you don't hear a lot of English accents, or at least I don't, out and about. And he was so polite to the checkout woman, so I turned around and I think I just said hi to you, and then we got to talking in the checkout line, and
Well, what was funny, sorry to interrupt, what was funny is knowing you now, is that you were, this is going to come out wrong, I apologize in advance. What's so funny knowing you now is that you were so sparkling and assertive, and you looked me in the eye, and I think, well, a phone number was exchanged.
I asked you for your number to meet up later. I will say this, when I first moved to Seattle, and I did move just 2 months before I met Matt, or 3, I moved in August, September, 3. Anyway, I was really assertive with meeting people because it was a new city, and I had broken up with somebody, and I wanted to meet people, and I had lived in Baltimore away from my family, but I had never lived on my own so much. So I was like, I want to go out and meet people. And you'd be surprised, especially when you're in a new city. I thought oh, this is a chance to be the best version of myself. And the version of myself I wanted to be was outgoing and very kindly, you said sparkly, which I wouldn't say that, but just friendly and more outgoing and outside of maybe my comfort zone. And it's easy to do that when there's a handsome man. Well, not easy, but it felt necessary at the time, and
Well, the other thing you have to tell the listeners, because I never tire of saying it, is who are you living with? Who are you living with?
Oh, right. I was living with a rocket scientist.
That is true.
Who I had known since she was born.
Yeah,
we were
your
childhood friends. She was my neighbor.
Let's summarize that, listeners. Cecilia's oldest friend is a rocket scientist, and they were living together. And by the way, this tends towards...
I credit her with moving to Seattle and meeting Matt, meeting my husband, and just having the freedom of living in the West Coast is fabulous. But it was. She's a great one to go out with, because guys will ask you, "What do you do?" "Oh, I'm a barista," which is what I would be saying at the time. And she goes, "I'm a rocket scientist," and it's like, "Woo, what's that like?"
Well, the other thing about her is that what I want to do one day, I haven't had the courage to do it yet, is for her to turn to me and say something like, "Matt, you cook quite a bit, and I'm making this tomato soup. What was that thing that you said offset the sweetness?" And all I want to be able to say is, just put in a couple of shiitake mushrooms. It's not rocket science. I always want to do that, and I haven't had the guts yet.
Great line. I'm sure she'd really appreciate that.
Yes, said Cecilia through gritted teeth.
Yeah, that's that old comedy you get with an older husband. It's nice and nostalgic. Now, I'm so mean. I'm sorry. Okay, we'll take that out. But dad jokes. Okay.
So then what happened?
So then I got your number, obviously. No, I got your number.
Yeah.
I never take that for granted. And although oftentimes I think if you ask people for their number, they're so embarrassed they will give you their number either way, even if they don't like you, and they never text you back. Because I've had guys do that, where we exchange numbers, and either they ask me for my number or I ask them for theirs, and then they never hit me back up. Many times. Not many, that makes you sound like a loser, but yeah, actually many times. But anyway, then we walked outside, and you left. Me and my mom were talking about how handsome you were, but I do remember...
Oh, shucks.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
We did see your hospital bracelet, because you still had it on.
Right. No, let's be clear. You mean the one that I'd got a couple of days previously?
At the hospital when you collapsed.
The plastic bracelet.
The plastic bracelets that they give you when you go in, with your birth date. And, And then that kind of created an air of mystery for sure.
And your mum said, well, very wisely.
Well, my mom was like concerned, but
I'm not surprised.
I
meet this strange man, probably with stitches in his head.
But you were very handsome, so what did I care?
Was there a blood stain? Did I look rugged into the bargain?
No, I think you look stubbled, but I like that look.
And by the way, all this about how we met is tending towards a question that, as we head towards the close of this episode, that I want to ask to Cecilia. But everything we've said so far is going to come to this question.
But the funny thing is that at the time I was living with my roommate and great friend in this apartment building that was literally like, I don't know, a park, just a small park across from where Matt was living.
Oh, you could throw a baseball and it would hit my apartment.
Yeah, so the next day I'm out with my mom again because she's visiting me from D.C. and we see Matt out and about. It was like a small town. I never lived somewhere like where we used to live in Seattle. That was so small. Yeah, I really loved that about it. And it felt very to me in my kind of, what's that word, infatuation with Matt, like fate. I was like, oh, this is so fate. And then,
well, just to interrupt you, another thing that you touched on there, and that this is typical of the sort of thing we want to talk about in this podcast, and we want, listener, your feedback on, is how our age changes the perception of where we've lived. The neighborhood we're talking about is Columbia City, where I'd lived for 12 years. It's in South Seattle.
And I'd just been there months, but...
and we ended up living there for a year or two together.
Yeah.
But we want to talk about this, and we won't do it in this episode, but we want to talk about Columbia City, which is a great place, by the way, great neighborhood.
And just like the differences between...
Until we moved. We're now a couple of miles away from that.
But the differences between city life and like suburban life, which I had so heavily known with a bit of city life, but not much, and just... the differences, and this place that we live, Columbia City, was sort of a happy medium between all three, city and suburban and like country, because it had, like Matt always said, a village feel, which I feel like being American, or from the United States, I never really think of places as villages. I think like small town, I think is kind of the word.
Given that we are different ages, the one thing that I think, if you see our difference in age, like a Venn diagram with two circles and they meet in the middle, one thing that we can both agree on that's great about Columbia City, and as I say, we've now moved a little bit further away, but is that now I think about it, it's just right for families with kids.
Yeah.
It's just right for young couples.
Yeah.
It's just right for couples
and
more my age.
Me and my roommate moved there. And
it's a nice balance.
Yeah, she found the neighborhood because it was cheaper, less daunting. It was not cheap by any means, inexpensive, but cheaper than living, say, in like a downtown Capitol Hill or more established neighborhood, like in the city. We were like, oh, this is something... or at least for me, because I was working barista and those types of jobs, like food service jobs, it was like something you could kind of do with another room.
The other
you
thing
could make it do with a one bedroom. But anyway, I'm not going to.
The other thing that's true of it, and again, we're talking.
And you don't need a car. Yeah, also that.
Yeah, and by the way, we're talking ourselves out of a podcast here, because another thing we both agree on about Columbia City, even though we lived both opposite sides of the park, is that despite the difference in age, having a park there was like having a huge backyard where we didn't have to pay for the upkeep.
Yeah.
Or
worry about...
These nice men and women would come and mow the lawns. And there was a little library. There was a library perched on the edge.
I was that lovely person mowing the lawns, but it's lovely to have a yard, or as you know, English people say a garden, but just like your backyard. It's such nice privacy. And this was basically like you lived in an apartment and you got that yard.
Yeah.
It was fabulous because, you know, it's just like walking outside from your apartment and there's the park. So that was...
Because you were brought up in a very nice
I grew up in
Herndon,
Virginia, which is northern Virginia.
Yeah.
Nova, the best part of Virginia by far. Everywhere else, no, I'm kidding. That's not true. But I was born in D.C. My parents did different types of work, but my dad was in government work, so that's why they lived in D.C.
So your mum's a writer, and I was leafing through it just a couple of hours ago. Your dad, as you say, works in government. Your great-granddad was pretty much a famous senator. We can come back to him another time. Let's talk a bit about my background. My dad, my late dad, God bless his memory. He was a writer too. He was a journalist on Fleet Street, which is, well, it used to be a real place. Fleet Street used to be full of newspapers, and now it's really just it's used that term in a figurative way. Mum used to work in my hometown, Guildford, before she transferred her work hours to us to bring me and my sisters up. So that's us. And before we go any further, we want to build this podcast on something of a solid foundation. So let's look at let's look at some numbers. So in the USA, and the same is true of Australia, UK, and Canada, about 1% of marriages are where there's at least a 20-year age gap, where the man is 20 years older than the woman. And if you reverse it, it's just 0.4% of all marriages are when the woman is at least 20 years older than the man. Not sure about same-sex relationships.
Yeah.
But that means, Cecilia, that if we were in an ordinary size auditorium with 100 couples and they said, stay behind if there's at least a 20-year age gap in your marriage, we'd be the only ones left in that auditorium.
Yeah.
So there aren't many of us. And
no, but I feel like it seems through media that there are more than you'd think. There's like Catherine McPhee and David Foster is just a more current one that I'm thinking of, but also in TV shows it's very common, almost without explanation, for there to be an older male character and a younger female character.
Yeah.
Well, in movies and TV, it's much more common, and in celebrities' lives in general. A funny thing people always say is Leonardo DiCaprio, who I think is maybe coming around to 50 years old, never dates a woman over 25 years old, historically speaking.
Huh.
So in the media, I think it's very often you see a older man and a younger woman, but the reverse, not so much.
Does that annoy you? I mean, especially now you're in that sort of relationship. Does that get to you?
I don't think it annoys me. In fact, I had a friend once, because since I was not very young, but since I was adolescent, pre-adolescent, I loved older men. I always did, actors and such, like Hugh Laurie. But I had a friend say to me once, when you're older, I can completely see you dating younger men. And I was like, huh? What? And I was almost put off by it. And then I thought, no, there's nothing wrong with that. They call it like a cougar, right? But it doesn't really bother me. I think it's more about probably biology in the end of the day, and people wanting to have families at the end of it. And
Yeah.
Men can have families have children much longer than women can. So there's that. But I guess part of me maybe is a bit bothered. But
Well, but as I listened to you say that, and as I was preparing to do this first episode, I was trying to put my finger on what we could bring to the listeners, if you like, as the central romance of our marriage. And then when I was on my walk, it hit me. Really, it's that this marriage could not have happened in any other way or at any other time. I mean, put it this way. When I was immigrating, when I was in my mid-20s, late 20s, when I was flying over on Continental Airlines to arrive in the US, by the way, that dates me, Continental, you, and I didn't even know you existed, you were a toddler.
yeah, and it sounds quite gross when we say it. Well, not gross, but it sounds a bit odd.
It's very odd.
Yeah,
when I think about it like that.
I think it's more about, once somebody's an adult, they make their own decisions.
Yeah.
Nobody in my life was surprised that I was dating and then married an older man. It was not
Well,
a surprise at all.
well,
Had been
yeah.
quite foreshadowed.
Yeah, and yes, that's right. And also at this point, I should make clear that I've been married once before.
Yeah.
Now, that marriage...
I have not.
Yeah, and this is your first marriage. Now,
That's correct.
that marriage was a wonderful marriage to a wonderful person. And I still care about her a lot. And it's a mark of the woman that she's actually... I said to her, look, we'll probably have to mention you in the podcast. And I said, do you want me to give you a false name? And she said, no, you can use my real name. So I'll try not to do that too much, because I'm still old-fashioned. That still strikes me as bandying a woman's name about, as they used to say in P.G. Wodehouse novels. But so I loved that marriage. But when I say that our marriage couldn't have happened another way, I mean that it's not that we look at each other and say, wow, we've been living in parallel all these years, because to the extent that we did, you were a kid. So it's just, I suppose I could have met you if I was in my 70s and you were about my age. And I suppose now we're of an age where we could, hopefully one day we will have at least one child.
I don't think it's always about
but
parallels.
Otherwise it couldn't have happened,
Yeah, and I think it can be a hard thing dating someone who's very much like you. Men I've dated who are my age or around my age or my generation maybe. It's a bit of a double-edged sword sometimes. You're similar in ways that help you, but also similar or similar in ways that are not good traits, so that can be difficult. So I think what's so nice about having a diverse age group of people in your life is lovely, but I never feel like it's a struggle to relate to you because you're twice my age at all.
Yeah.
If anything, it's fun, and you get to learn about things and enjoy things that maybe you wouldn't have enjoyed otherwise, which is lovely. Like Taggart. Or Alan Partridge.
Yeah,
or
a couple of
any number of things.
You're talking about a couple of TV shows there.
TV. Yeah, mostly. It's my favorite thing.
But there are things that we want to bring to the podcast, and we'll do them, as we go along, different episodes. But there are ways that we differ. But I think that
different terms for things, or things perhaps both of us have not heard. I'll often say to Matt, "Well, what does that mean?" And I'm such an Anglophile. I love to learn the different slangs and the different little things and what it means, or just like history in general. Poor Matt's go-to on all of that type of thing.
But sometimes you'll use a phrase, and I don't know if it's so much to do with your age as the region you come from, but the one that always got me is when Cece would say, Matt, I'm going to go shopping and I'll be a minute. Now, where I come from, that means I won't be long. But when you use it, it means you're going to be a long time. Is that right?
Well, I guess the term I've always heard is I haven't seen you in a minute, which is a pop culture thing, definitely, that I heard on YouTube or something, or it's been a minute. It might have even been in a song, I don't remember. But it means, it's sort of like ironic. It's like, it's been a minute since so-and-so. It's part of black culture originally, meaning it's been a very long time, but the joke is, it's been a minute. It's sort of the tone of voice that you use it in, but yeah, definitely different.
And I hadn't. Now, I've been round the block. I've lived all over the world.
Yeah,
and I hadn't heard of it. I'd never heard of anyone use it. I thought you were I thought you were insane.
Yeah, well, it's probably the type of thing that, it's probably going to, you know how things are. They sound cool for a while and then not anymore. I'm definitely not on the cusp for those things, but yeah.
You've got 36 pairs of panties in the laundry basket. You say, I'm going to go and hang them on the line. I'll be a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to head towards the end of this
yes.
podcast first episode now, but with two questions. Cecilia, one's for you that I've been meaning to ask you, and we'll come to that. But the question for our sweet listener, as you rightly called them, is this. Listener, what do you think is a crucial age gap in a relationship? It doesn't have to be a marriage, but when does age become relevant?
Yeah.
Is it 5 years? I think most people would say, I know for a fact that most people who are married, I think about between 55-60% have only about 1, 2, 3, 3.5 year age gap.
Right, and percents...
But 5 years doesn't seem that much to me.
Percents confuse me, but if you're a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old, huge difference. I think a lot of it comes with the age that you're at. The age you are makes such a difference. I mean, we can all remember if you're an older sibling, a younger sibling, or maybe you had older cousins, it's like when you're 10 and they're 13, it makes such a huge difference. Whereas if you're 23, your friend's 26, doesn't really make such a difference. But it's because the rate in which you're progressing at that age is so big, especially socially in adolescence. It's like, oh my goodness. So, but even the difference between a 3-month-old and a 9-month-old is astounding. So it depends. But I think your question is, when does the amount of years you have apart become a fixture in the relationship.
Yeah, when does it? I mean,
Yeah.
so okay, 5 years probably not so much. What about 10 years? I mean, again,
Yeah.
I think this is where your point you just made comes in. 10 years in some relationships it is hardly anything.
No,
but in
no,
others, like
yeah.
if someone who is 19 married someone who is just coming up to 30,
Sure,
now
yeah.
that 10 years is usually when
out of
people
a
have-
romantic setting, if you have a sibling 10 years older than you might very well look at them more like a parent figure. I mean,
Yeah.
they might have done a lot of the raising of you, or at least how you
Yeah.
saw yourself as an adult. It's such a significant amount of age.
Yeah.
Like I know with your eldest sister, there's 7 years difference or more.
Yeah.
And similar with my eldest
Think so,
sister.
yeah.
So I
Yeah,
saw them
golly.
as like the quintessential older person. Oh, they're, when they were driving, I couldn't even picture getting my license, that kind of thing.
And to be clear, you mean you mean the age gap between me and my oldest sister?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
yes.
7 years. Yeah.
Me and Matt are both the youngest in a family of 3 children.
Yeah,
So
and
our
by the way,
eldest sisters.
that clicking sound you heard is every listener to this saying, "Okay,
Yeah,
now it
yeah,
makes
yeah, shut
sense."
up, yeah.
The three, both the youngest of 3, spoiled brats we are. No,
Yeah.
I hope we're not spoiled brats.
Well, I definitely am. No problem.
You're proud of it. You're a little
I'm not
princess.
proud of it, but I feel like I gotta cop to it eventually.
Well, I think
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know where it comes. Maybe it's your great granddad's blood. Maybe he's like thumping the lectern
it was
in Congress. Or
homegrown. I can remember throwing tantrums, not wanting to wear the clothes that my mother had bought me to wear. And I was so into clothes and how I would look at a maybe 6 or 7, having these tantrums, and she'd look at me and go, "Where did you come from?" Because my mom is
I often ask the same
lovely
thing.
dresser, and she's like a French person. She just has a chic look, but she never would focus that much on it. And I would be like, "I need the matching knee socks with the matching plaid skirt with the headband," and I would freak out about it, and she would just go, "Where'd you come from?" So I think a lot of that brattiness is homegrown for sure.
well, and that.
Whether that makes it worse, probably, I don't know.
But listening to something you said there, it brings me to pretty much the end of this episode and my final question, which is to you, Cecilia. And inside me, there are two, a bit like an angel on each shoulder, there's 2 competing factors. There's the egotistical side of me, and then there's the journalistic side, because, as I said, my dad was a journalist, one of my sisters was a journalist for a while, one of my nephews is a sports presenter on TV in Britain. I just love my nephews and my niece, by the way. Can I just say that here? And that's something else we'll touch on.
I agree.
Because I've got
I
2
love
brand
my
new, one
nephew
nephew
and
and one
niece as
niece.
well.
And I didn't think that would happen in my life. I mean, I've
Wait,
got...
we were talking about your ego.
Yeah, we were talking about the journalistic side of me and the egotistical side. And in this case, the journalistic side has won out, because I think people listening to this have got one burning question. You moved to Seattle, 23, and I'm just going to say it. It's just a fact, you are head-turningly beautiful. You're the kind of woman who, I know because I've seen it happen, when guys are seated in pubs and they hear the front door going of the pub and they look round and then they almost snap their necks doing a double take.
A pub is a bar.
Okay, a pub or a bar. So you just are. So there you were 23, new in Seattle. You lived with a freaking rocket scientist, for crying out loud. You went out with that one fella who bought you jewellery. Another fellow had a glamorous job, and
I dated hundreds of men. Hundreds.
yeah, who we
That's a
strongly
joke.
suspect was. Let's put it this way: we strongly suspect that one of your boyfriends was in the intelligence community, and so all these guys. And here's the question: I'm folding my arms to brace myself to ask it. Why the heck did you choose me? When I proposed to you, why did you blush and bow your head and murmur yes to me, of all people, this skinny, annoying English idiot?
Oh, well, you were the first man to ever ask me to marry you. And it's not just that, it's because I love you. Like the Lizzo song says, 'cause I love you. But I felt it like it was fate. And I am very flattered by the way you described me, but I don't see myself as a head turner, and I never will. And it wasn't. It was more like I felt such a compatibility of humor and just conversation. It felt like it would have been. It felt like fate for me.
Yeah.
The option of I usually am quite a indecisive person, but that was not a hard decision for me to make. We hadn't known each other very long, but that was part of the charm. But why did you want to marry me? Why did you ask me? Well,
You're flipping the question now.
I don't think I have asked you that before, because
well,
let a good thing lie.
well, I see that a couple of minutes ago I did something unfair, which is that when I asked you that question, I emphasised, your physical beauty, because you're 5'8" and just gorgeous.
Smoke and mirrors. Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, you always say that, and it's very sweet.
I
but
like
it's
it. I think
very,
Dolly Parton
it's very
first
humble.
said that. Costs a lot to look this cheap. No, that's what she said.
Yeah, but you don't. You're just natural. I've seen you first thing in the morning, and you can just step out of the bathroom brushing your teeth, and you look like you've been made up for
very
2 hours.
Sweet. But I'll say something.
No, I haven't got to my point yet. I haven't answered the question. So it was unfair of me to emphasise that, because that for me is, it's just a fraction of you. But that was the first thing for me. Of course, I'm not going to, and if people are listening to this thinking, oh, I see. So this fella was married to, is about 50, he's married to someone else. And suddenly this beautiful young woman of 23 walks into his life. What a piece of, what he is. Well, looks can be deceiving. It did not happen that way. I'd been separated from my first wife for months and months and months before I even knew Cecilia existed. And I'm sorry it's boring. I'm sorry I can't give you any drama. But we really did just bump into each other in the supermarket. And to start with, it was her beauty. Then I thought it was sweet and confident of her to ask for my phone number. And I was very, very flattered. And then we just got on. And again, I'm going to come back to that answer about the solid central romance of this marriage, is that it couldn't really have happened in any other time frame or with any other permutation. And what's extraordinary is that even though there's a quarter of a century between us, it's like we were made for each other.
Yeah.
I mean, we argue, we've had yelling matches. We're going to come in the next couple of episodes to some very, very worrying periods in our relationship, most of which, different ways, were down to my behaviour, and we'll come to that, because it hasn't been an easy ride.
We had a lot in common, and not like it's that classic line you hear men use where they go, "You have an old soul." But I certainly appreciate people with some life experience, because I've certainly had a experience in my life that Matt and I felt similar in that way in a lot of different ways. So, it doesn't always have to be somebody in your peer group that you can have that much in common with.
No.
Yeah.
It doesn't. We don't want to outstyle our welcome in this first episode.
And we're going to have steak.
We're going to go off and we're going to make our Trader Joe's dinner. But what we want to leave you with is what we're going to come to in the next episode, which is that once we'd met in October, we were married on Christmas Eve of that year in a courthouse in Kent, which is a few miles south of Seattle. And we spent about 8-9 months together, and then something happened.
Yeah, we took time apart, and we'll talk about that more.
We'll talk about that next time.
As well as other things.
And we'll also talk about how, crucially, on the 19th of January 2020, just before COVID, just before lockdown, how a combination of someone in England 4,000 miles away and my first wife saved my life.
Yeah.
Literally true. That's not just teasing across an episode. That happened. Yeah. We'll come to that, and I'll tell you what happened next time. Thanks for listening. Email us the answer to all the questions we've bombarded you with. Bombarded you with.
Yeah.
aBrit&aBrat@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. I'm going to say goodbye. Cecilia will say goodbye.
Yeah. Bye now. For now.
See you next time. Thanks for listening.